don't know much about Alan, and like I said, that's our whole purpose as Interfan, as part of it's historical, to show you your forebears, you know, trailblazers that gave you an opening. I just found out through Doug that Alan was a good part of what became known as Chicago Comic Con in the Fandom with Joe Sarno and others. So, but now I want to hear from Russ, his other good friend. And
well, this is kind of an emotional day for me. Because of Jim, or Alan, or AJ, or whatever you want to call him, it's really what laid the groundwork for my interest in self-publishing and staying in the comic book business as long as I had as a hobby. I met him, just like Jim, in the basement of Joe Sarno's house, where he ran his comic book store until comic book stores became something that actually existed. Joe used to advertise in the Sun-Times and the Tribune. He'd have a little classified ad in there, and I'd have my parents drive me over to Joe's house, you know, comics for sale. And that's where I met Jim. And I didn't know fanzines existed until I met Jim. And when he showed me one of his issues of comic book, it may have been issue number 5, because it certainly wasn't any earlier than that. That actually inspired me to do something like that myself, and I eventually published my own fanzine, Maelstrom, a couple of years later, about 5 years after I met Jim for the first time. And he was always an inspiration to me. I actually did dedicate my first issue to Jim when I published it. And as Jim pointed out, you know, Hanley was always there when we were doing some kind of a project. He always had words of encouragement for us. You know, when we were feeling down, and or if we were stuck in some way, he would say, "Hey, try this," and we'd try it. And invariably, he was correct. And yeah, he just got us all on that road to being enthused about self-publishing and comics in general. And you know, we, as Jim pointed out, we have all worked on different projects together. He always loved to do jam pieces of artwork, and he'd always work his friends into the stories, just like Jim was saying. And you know, he was an inspiration to me. And we actually had collaborated a few times when I just decided to join the Air Force in 1978. And I think he was kind of disappointed when I did that. He said, but even though he was disappointed, he's, you know, because we had been working together, he said, you know, I wish you all the best in what it is you want to do. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to be at the funeral because I was stationed in England at the time. And I still remember the day I got the letter from Jim. It was tough. And you know, I really miss Jim. So that's really all I have to say. And but you know, he's never far from my mind, and one of my prized possessions is the entire run of comic book. So, Krista, you had a great day. That's all I got.
okay, one last testimonial, and that's going to be from Doug Rice, who you personally know him, but he knew of him and was affected by his art. So
my perspective will be more historical than personal.
So have the floor.
Chicago has a rich tradition in literature, popular literature, going back to the pulp novels and things back in the 30s and 40s. Chicago was a major clearinghouse, publishing house for that. It was also the basis for a Kingfisher syndicate for comic books, like Flash Gordon. And after all this died away, there was virtually nothing. It was kind of a wasteland for a while. And it was a man like Jim Hanley who kept things alive in here at first, drawing his own stuff for his own use, his own pleasures, and yet, but always being very meticulous about developing it and continuing it and evolving it into something that would eventually grab other people's attention. And finally, he began publishing it, going to the actual trouble of actually publishing his work. Crude as it may be by today's standards, it had love, it had rich ideas, it had tradition behind it. And he attracted, by just publishing it, he built an audience automatically. Because if you publish it, people will read it. And when I first came into Fandom, it was already established at little conventions at the YMCA on Harrison Street. They used to have these comic book shows every month. And Joe Sarno and Larry Charette were very much organizing that kind of thing, but they weren't able to get anything going unless someone like Jim Hanley had been there first, getting people into that mindset for comics, comic collecting, and getting involved and enjoying it again. And by the time I got there, these conventions were very popular. And at the very heart of it, the very friendliest core part of it was Jim and his friends like Jim Engel and Russ and Chuck Fiala. These guys were all there producing stuff, working together, producing their fanzines, and that was exciting to the rest of us who wanted to do comic books for real and learn how to do it. We watched them and learned, became kind of a sponge, I guess, and tried to do what they did. And we went back to our college dorms for something, and we produced our own fanzines. And later on, we did some of this work to get shown at comic book shows later on, when the first comic book conventions became annual things in the summer. And the professionals would see our portfolios and do this work. Or they were, even comic book publishers began to form in Chicago itself. I was the first staff employee at First Comics. I don't think First Comics would have ever happened if Jim Hanley hadn't started his book first. He was the first Comics. You had a great day.